good afternoon, and good evening. As you join, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, please go ahead and put your name and your organization, maybe where you're from in the world, in the chat. And we'll get started in about 30 seconds or so. All right. Welcome, Eric. Welcome, Brian. I think we can go ahead and get started with the meeting. And as people join, then we can have them introduce themselves in the chat. So I'd like to welcome you to the Strategic Learning and Adaptive Management Peer Community Meeting. It's really exciting to have people interested in improving learning and adaptive management in their programs, so I welcome you. But before we start, we'd like to inform you that this session will be recorded. So right now it's recording, and that we are also providing interpretation in French. So please, I'd like to invite everyone to select their preferred language for this session. You can do so by clicking the interpretation icon at the bottom of the Zoom screen and selecting either English or French. You can choose to mute the original audio or listen to it at a lower volume. So please go ahead now and choose whether you'd like to hear the meeting in English or French. And we will move on and start the meeting. All right, so if you have not had a chance to do so yet, please introduce yourselves. We'd love to know your name, what organization you are working for, and your role, and maybe even where you're coming from, where it is that you're based. And as you introduce yourself, I will introduce the facilitation team. So I am Jenny Haddle. I'm the Senior Learning and Adaptive Management Advisor for the IDEAL activity. I'll explain a bit more about IDEAL in a few minutes. I am a co-facilitator, and the main facilitator for this session is Eleanor Bedford. Eleanor, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning. I'm Eleanor Bedford. I work with Acute Insight supporting the IDEAL activity, and I bring about 25 years in emergency humanitarian relief and development, working with both USAID, NGOs, implementing partners around the world. And it's my pleasure to join you all here this morning. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you. And also helping us out today will be Bella. She's on production and technical support. You'll see her as IDEAL tech support. And also Eric Frias and Elisa Dickey are also joining us from Acute Insight, and will be monitoring the chat and ensuring that we capture any questions that you put in the chat as the meeting progresses. So let's move on, and just I wanted to give you a little bit of background on the Strategic Learning and Adaptive Management peer community, because some of you may be new, or it would be helpful to have a refresher on how it is that we came to create this peer community. The IDEAL activity, which is the implementer-led design, evidence, analysis, and learning activity, was funded by USAID's Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance. So BHA works to support the US government's goal of improving food and nutrition security among the world's most vulnerable households and communities. And then IDEAL addresses knowledge and capacity gaps expressed by the food and nutrition security. We support them in the design and implementation of effective emergency and non-emergency food security activities. So there's many different types of activities that IDEAL does. This is only one of them. We strive to support implementing partners to do better learning and adaptive management, and hence the creation of this particular community. It's specifically designed to bring together peers to share and discuss promising practices and issues around themes related to strategic learning and adaptive management. Our last meeting focused on approaches for improving local engagement for learning and adaptive management. And there is a recording of that meeting. If you have not seen that meeting or did not attend it, you can always visit our website and find that meeting. Today, we'll be discussing ways to build and sustain a learning culture within an activity project organization. And I'm actually really excited about this conversation because the two ladies who are joining us have a lot of expertise in this area. But before we introduce our presenters, I'd like to hear a little bit from the audience. We're going to do something called a chat storm. And that is, I'm going to ask you a question and you type in the answer. And when I say go, you hit enter. And then we all see the answers together. So the question I'd like to ask you is, what is an obstacle you've seen in creating a learning culture? So from where you are sitting, think about an obstacle you've seen in creating a learning culture in your organization or in your activity or project. Type that answer into the chat, and when I say go, I want you to press enter. I'll give you about a minute to type your answers in, and we'll see what kind of obstacles people are facing in their day-to-day work. Okay, maybe 15, 30 more seconds. Oh, we have somebody who is too fast. That's okay. Attrition and turnover of staff. So we already have an answer. How about we go ahead and enter our answers? 1, 2, 3, go. Oh, there's so many, I can't even read them. There's just too many coming through. Not enough staff dedicated for learning, getting people to interact with knowledge and learning products. People are afraid of expressing opinions because they could be judged or misunderstood. So a bit of fear. Trust building is necessary. Staff turnover, short institutional memory, poor enforced filing systems, time and intentional space for reflection. Leadership doesn't prioritize learning resources and time. Competitive, there's so much here. Time pressure, resistance to change. So this is fantastic because I think you guys have hit a whole lot of the issues and obstacles that we face every single day when we're trying to implement a learning culture and to improve projects and activities through adaptive management and through an active learning cycle where we're constantly learning information and adapting based on that information that's coming in. So without further ado, I am going to pass this over to Eleanor to introduce our speakers and see what kind of interesting solutions our speakers have come up with to help in this.
Thanks, Jenny. There's a lot of experience in this room. Just the chat storm, although we're talking about obstacles, it's inspiring to see. It's my pleasure to welcome two exceptional colleagues to share their experience and lessons learned with all of you. But before I introduce them, I just want to level set for a minute. What are we talking about when we're talking about a learning culture? First and foremost, it's an environment where individuals and teams are supported in being able to continuously learn and improve their work without fear of repercussions if results and outcomes aren't achieved as expected. Second, a strong learning culture facilitates the process of adaptive management and contributes to improved programming. The result? When project management puts in place processes and tools for learning while also fostering a psychologically safe environment, staff are able to explore their curiosity, ask questions, and share experiences that inform decision-making for adaptive management. So today we want to hear from all of you how you're working to do this. And right now we have the pleasure of having Florence and Kara with us to discuss the approaches and tools they've used in food security programming. Let me introduce Florence. She's the strategic learning lead at Mercy Corps. She's currently in Kampala. She is the monitoring, evaluation, and learning professional with Mercy Corps with nearly a decade of experience building monitoring and learning systems for development programs across East Africa and the Middle East. And I'm sure many of you have seen her amazing newsletter that we all benefit from on LinkedIn. She spent the last 4.5 years designing and implementing CLA systems for USAID-funded multi-sectoral RIFSAs, primarily in Uganda. Her work focus, now she works globally, her work focus on supporting program teams in evidence generation, translation, and use for improved program impact. Kara Rabanarilana, sorry, Kara, is the strategic learning lead based in Madagascar with Catholic Relief Services. Kara is an international development professional committed to promoting intentional organizational learning for program impact. She has over 20 years of experience leading mixed methods research for program design, implementation, and evaluation for iterative adaptive management, mainly in sub-Saharan Africa. Since 2020, she's worked as the strategic learning lead for the Maharo Resilience Food Security Activity for CRS in Madagascar. In this role, she works alongside program and partner teams to use CLA tools and systems in a supportive, enabling environment that leverages co-learning to achieve program quality. So glad to have you both here. So, Florence, when you joined the Palu activity, what were your observations of the learning culture's status on that activity? And what did you do first to improve it?
Thanks, Eleanor, and it's good to be here. And I'm excited to share and learn from the team as well, alongside Kara. So just a bit of a background on, I think, the learning culture within Apollo activity. When I joined the team as a monitoring and evaluation officer, and we were all really trying to set up the system to make sure that our M&E system was strong enough to respond to the donor requirements around indicators and reporting. But we realized that we had highlighted, a learning plan somewhere in the MEL plan, but that was not really being implemented because of a lot of the barriers and challenges that the team actually mentioned in the chat. So there was a discussion around how we really wanted to move forward learning and adaptive management within the activity. And we chose to actually allocate resources to make that happen. So a couple people highlighted resources being a limitation. So we need time, we need staff, we need the technical capacity required that is needed if we are actually going to do learning and adaptive management. But just to highlight one of the key challenges that we saw as we started to build this culture, we saw that a lot of the learning really involved the technical leads and technical managers, and the frontline staff who make up the higher percentage of the employees in that program were being left out of the learning activities. So we had quarterly review meetings like most activities do, and we were only able to bring together the managers and the senior leadership team, and our frontline staff were left out of those conversations. So together with the team, we brainstormed on some ideas to make sure that we are bringing in, this very important team members because they have a lot of expertise and they're the ones who are interacting with the community on a day-to-day basis. So we wanted to leverage that and also give them, some power to be engaged in decision making in terms of what we were doing in the activity. So we designed systems that allowed them to participate. So just to highlight a couple of the things that we did, the first one was think about what are the tools that we can create to standardize this learning from the field.
Oh, Florence, so sorry, we have connection issues. Kara, I'm afraid that Florence may have dropped. Yes, I think if we go off camera, we'll probably have greater bandwidth. Let's see if Florence can join us again in just a minute. But while we're waiting, Kara, do you want to go ahead and share? I know that you introduced a really interesting approach called Fear Fest. I love, love, love that name. Would love you to share with everyone what it is and how it came about while we're waiting for Florence to pop back in. All right.
There we go. How about being off mute? Thank you so much, Eleanor, and for Florence and the team for inviting us today. And thank you all for joining. It's the idea of building a sound learning culture comes from a focus in our Maharo program of specific learning values. When we were developing these tools and processes, a lot of people mentioned them, and Florence talked a lot about that. The idea that people feel safe, they feel that they're in an environment where making mistakes or taking risks is acceptable. And for us in our CLA plan for Maharu, we really focus on 4 key learning values. And that's our openness, frankness of how things are going. Are you open to new things? Are you open to new tools and processes? Are you open for collaboration that enables learning? And then trust and honesty. So the idea that these values really build on a learning culture. And for us, a part of that is also being in a psychologically safe environment. And I started to look more into that because I saw that people initially thought learning was, oh, you're like police or you're auditors, or you're just looking at, are we completing this tool? It's not really about the gift that comes from, well, we failed and this didn't go as we thought, but wow, look what we were able to do. So we wanted to really turn that on its head. And we thought, okay, for people to really be open and honest, they need to feel that they're safe. They're safe with their colleagues, they're safe to take risks and make mistakes. And that really enables an environment for learning. And I looked at other organizations that did a lot of learning and psychologically safety discussions. And it really came from a blog that was developed by Google, and they called them anxiety forums. And in French, anxiety does not have a good connotation, so I changed it to a fear forum, and other organizations use this term as well, Engineers Without Borders and others. So the idea is I wanted to create a tool that would help teams open up, that was anonymous, that we could talk about, okay, what am I afraid of? What am I concerned about? Maybe it has nothing to do with the technical aspects like Florence talked about, but okay, I am so overwhelmed. You know, some people said, I don't know if I'm giving enough to my family. I don't know if I'm giving enough outside of my job, or I don't know if I'm doing enough, or I'm afraid, you know, that we're going to make a mistake. You know, things that seem very standard, but for us, I think in a culture we're taught and we're brought up in a place, it's good to make a mistake, you know. And I shared with our team, Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, but it took him 1,000 failures to actually create the light bulb. So the idea is, for us, the fear forum was about leveling the playing field and creating an enabling environment of learning, not just for our technical team, but we expanded this into our country program. I introduced the discussion of psychological safety into operations retreats. It became a buzzword. It became a discussion that people had, thinking about one-on-one discussions with our colleagues. And so it actually went beyond the actual learning plan, but it became kind of an idea and building on those values of how we live and breathe and do learning on a day-to-day basis. And if you have that psychologically safe environment, anything is possible. People are open, and our colleagues feel very open to say, you know what, I'm not really sure what I'm doing, but I need your help. Can we collaborate on this? Or I found that this didn't work. What did you do? And I think that that's been a critical component, and it's been refreshing. And I think that for us, it was a start to really get that openness and get that enabling environment with leadership as well built. So thank you.
Fantastic to hear. I'm sure leadership played a key role, since the power differentials and what you're talking about here, trying to really cultivate a learning culture. It's all about leadership and the tools to do it. So Florence, let's go back to you and hear more about your initial experience as you were describing really what it takes to help put the frontline staff, as you describe them, forward, all of their knowledge and experience. If it helps to go off camera to preserve bandwidth, feel free.
Cool. Thank you so much, Eleanor. And apologies, I lost my electricity, so that happened. But yeah, so just highlighting and just I'll build on what Kara highlighted as well. I think for ours, we started looking at the technical aspects of it because we felt like there was a missing link there. So we developed standardized checklists that anyone within the team was able to use when they went to the field and interacted with the communities. So this was a very standardized and easy way for them to collect information that would help shape the discussions that we had internally around the context, if we're seeing early adoption of promoted practices, if we're seeing any signs of sustainability as we were, looking at sustainability at that point in the program. So that was very useful in terms of engaging the team. But then we realized that it was really beyond the tools and the technical expertise that the team had around learning competencies. We tried to think about how do we actually ensure that people feel like they're empowered to make those decisions. So we call this like decentralizing decision-making approach. But what we did was really have conversations with the team around, what was limiting them from sharing this information, and a lot of things came up around people not feeling like whatever they had was evidence, because I understand we all define evidence differently, and people look at rigor and say, if my methodology is not very rigorous, then I'm not gonna, say that I have any type of evidence. But we were able to have discussions with the team and say, observation is a type of data collection. You can collect a lot of information that can influence decision making from observation without even asking any question. So it was really us trying to translate what learning and adaptive management means at a program level, and what type of information is sufficient for us to do that on a day-to-day basis.
Fantastic, Florence. I love that. And you just reminded me when you said observation is evidence. You reminded me of a friend with whom I took a monitoring and evaluation for peace building course over 20 years ago. And he said, oh, you were the person that said, we do have, it's not anecdotal, it's anecdata. So I really appreciate your observations on observations are data and evidence. Let's talk a bit about the evolution of your experience working as learning advisors, seeking to adapt this approach, multiple approaches over time. What did you all do in terms of implementing these initiatives effective over time? What did you learn over time, and to what effect? Florence, go ahead.
Great, thank you. So I think as part of the evolution, I think we moved more towards what Kara was speaking about around the psychological safety, because we realized that it was really beyond just the technical support we were providing. And we wanted to build a culture within the team that allows them to actively engage in bringing in the information, translating that type of evidence to actionable things, and them feeling empowered to actually say, you know, I went to the field today, I interacted with these community members, and this is what is coming out. And based on this, this is what I'm advocating for, or this is what I'm advising us to do, because we need to align with, you know, what's happening on the ground. And this took a lot of engagement, you know, with different team members to understand what really motivates them, like what are the incentives for them to continue doing this. And I remember having really interesting conversations with teams, because I started out saying, you know, this is really important for the program. Like, we need to be a flagship program that's known for like learning. And people were like, okay, cool, maybe I'm not a part of the people who is going to contribute to that. You are CLA, so you do it, right? And I was like, oh, maybe it's good for the organization. We are a learning organization. People are like, cool, I don't really see how that contributes to my own personal, you know, growth and all this. But then it was really one of the key things, one of the strategies was really looking at how do I help them understand that if you collect this evidence and you have to report to your supervisor, or you have to advocate for whatever you need, you know, as an employee, either like a promotion or an increase, or you need resources to go and do some course or whatever, like, how can you use this information to show how you've made progress over time? Right? You can come and say, you know, this is what I've been doing, this is what I'm seeing in the communities. I've been able to advocate for a shift in resources to support this specific community because they were not doing well, and this is how they're doing right now. So it was really, there was that part of like, how do I incentivize the team to also see how they are benefiting from this as, you know, individuals, and not just saying program or institutional. So I think there was that shift to make sure that, you know, the learning culture is within the team. They feel comfortable asking questions. They feel comfortable referring to, you know, what they know as evidence, and advocating for changes. So I think, yeah, that has been really been an evolution, I think, from how we started doing learning, you know, that was more focused on the technical aspects.
Fantastic. Undoubtedly, it had benefits for the program, but I'm just struck by how much benefit it must have had for them as individuals with their own personal and professional development. Adaptive management really takes adaptive leadership, and you were empowering them each to be leaders in their own right. Over to you, Kara. How did your Fear Fests evolve?
Yeah, I would like to, I think building off of what you mentioned, the idea in terms of our learning in general, it's really sparking that interest and engagement in learning that's not coming from we should do this because we have to. It's thinking of why people are doing the learning. How is it benefiting them? What do they want to know for their use? Yes, from a technical aspect, but also that it creates an interest in engagement. It's not for, as you said, it's not for you, the CLA or the SLA or the chief of party or USAID. No, it's for all of us. And I think it was more also to bring about the idea that learning is a social event. Learning is not the individual SLA or CLA or the learning specialist. It's for everyone, and it's for everyone, by everyone, all the time. So it was really about creating this mindset. And I think for us, that was just one tool. I really want to build off of what Florence mentioned about we really went into the field and we developed easy tools for, we call them the pause and reflect. But it wasn't for specialists just here or in the PMU. It was for field agents. It was for officers, people who are on the ground in the field talking about what worked well, what is going well, what are we doing things right? You know, all of these questions that come from the field, and they're doing it and living it day by day. And so I think as what Florence mentioned too, it's getting feedback on those tools from the team. You know, we had them translate into Malagasy and we had different, and they said, no, let's change the order. Or we had a lot of focus on successes. And again, people were less focused on the what's failing, what's not going well. And so we had to think of a creative way. How can we inspire that discussion, right? And the leading into the adaptive management piece is the discussion on decisions. Okay, so it didn't go well, that's fine. So how did we change and then what happened? You know, thinking of it as our learning story. And I would say other tools that helped us do that is doing integrated monitoring visits, which Florence, you shared your tool that we use in the field, and putting people in taking their hat off as the water specialist or the food security specialist. You're going to go talk to a lead mother group and learn about maternal child health and nutrition. They said, no, we can't do that. I said, yes, you can. And you're going to do it as a man, and it's going to be awesome. No, I don't think I can do this. And everyone was afraid. And I said, no, we're all together, you know. And I think that too takes away the layers, the hierarchy, the inhibition. People thought, wow, I never really thought about that. Oh my gosh, I never paused to think what my colleague in nutrition is facing, or the emergency that's going on there. Oh my goodness, the gender issues. You know, it really it opened their eyes and it took off this kind of learning blindness, and that fear of learning, or oh, we can't do this, we can't do this alone. And I think it brought more of the idea of the collective. But the idea too was making tools useful that were easy to use and that didn't require an invention of a new process, building off of existing events, existing meetings, but just making them more intentional, adding a tool that and a way to document so that we're getting those conversations going, but we're not creating something on top of what already exists. And really, I would like to say too, building on that internal collaboration. In Malagasy, we in our team, we use the expression called the tupelu, and it's the three stones that cook a pot. You can't cook a pot with only two stones. And it basically, the idea was, we can't do learning on our own, and we have to work together to improve our collaborations to really get that learning. And it's often, you know, maybe people say, oh, I don't need it. I don't know if I can work with this person, or I don't know if I need that information. But the idea is that it's kind of this three-dimensional aspect. We all have to cook the rice. We all want to cook the pot. We all want to get there together. So let's all work together and not have this fear or this inhibition to make mistakes or to fail. So thanks.
It's fantastic to hear, Kara. I remember back in the day when we used to try to impress upon people when I was in an office at USAID, everyone is involved in monitoring evaluation. It's everyone's job. It is so much easier these days to say learning is everyone's job. Yeah. How have you seen a sort of snowball effect since you started using some of these tools and getting buy-in to the processes that you've been describing? Florence, I'll kick it to you first.
Thanks, Eleanor. So I would say, I think one thing is we've really seen a shift in terms of like the culture of learning and asking questions across the teams, and people really sharing what's not working and why they think that's not working. So it's less, you know, oh, I'm not doing well, you know, and I'm not performing in my job. It's more like, oh, why is this not happening, you know? when we do an assessment and we realize that in terms of, for example, behavior change, there are things that are not happening, then we ask the question why, and everyone is engaged because they want to know and they want to understand how we can do things differently. So I would say that ownership of the work that we are doing, I think that's something that we have seen grow within the team. And now a lot of good conversations about CLA and learning. Before it was just like, oh, it's your thing, do it. But now people have embraced that, and everyone is really talking about how, yes, I understand how I can learn, and do adaptive management, and I'm going to do this in my next job. And this is something that's positioning me well in this sector, because a lot of people just know that we have to be on scope, on time, and on budget. But it's like, okay, are we asking questions beyond, just those things that we know that we are supposed to be doing? So I think we have more. I think I'm very confident to say we have more adaptive leaders in international development right now because of those conversations and how people challenge one another to ask the difficult questions. And then just another aspect as well, as an activity, we went beyond just what we were doing within our team to even engage other external stakeholders. And I think one of the most successful thing that has happened recently is, close to our closeout. My activity closed out on 30th September. But close to that, we held a national learning event, and we brought together like stakeholders from, different parts of the country, but also different people who are engaged. We had a lot of community members to really share the community voice in that learning event. I think that's something that I've never experienced before, where we just had a very high percentage of community members who are not a part of NGOs or CSOs, who are just participants in those areas, who are brought together. And we had, of course, government officials from different levels. We had private sector actors coming together. We had a lot of different donors, not just one donor, to really challenge what the other donors are funding and how the sequencing is happening in terms of like how the funding is being brought into that region. So I think creating that environment within our team and us being able to replicate this at a higher level, I would say that was something that was very impressive. And we hope that the culture continues, beyond program level to different levels, because that is really needed if we're going to achieve the sustainable outcomes that we are looking at. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Florence. What an awesome example of snowball effect. Kara, how about you?
Yes, thank you. I think going off of what Florence said, definitely building on the external collaborations to extend kind of our idea of learning culture and tools that we've used to other programs within our own country program, to our external partners in the region where we're operating. Also doing integrated learning events around, similar to what you mentioned, but bringing in government actors, focusing on, we see these learning themes, let's drill down and let's share that out. And also I would say, thinking of communicating and having different types of learning tools for different audiences. We did earlier this year, we did a whole learning event around growth child monitoring. And then we thought about this idea of coming up with a way to communicate how our supply chain is working on different nutrition products, showing what we're doing as a program. So it allows us to think out of the box and also to share our examples with other programs and other stakeholders. I would also say that our technical staff are more confident and more comfortable to share with external communities of practice. We very much, as learning leaders, kind of gently and friendly, I should say in a friendly way, put our colleagues out there. Oh, they've done this great work. You should share. And I think that's a very key celebration and success, because before people might not have done that. I also think that sharing the different tools opens up discussions with leadership about leveraging knowledge management and learning, as Florence said, in a way that it wouldn't have been done. As a country program, we're developing our own learning strategy. This was happening before, but I think now we have more of the tools where we have more momentum and people aren't necessarily afraid of it, but are buying into the process, see the benefit. And I would say also extending that learning and tool into our emergency programming, learning from failure and what didn't work and extending that into specific timeframes for different emergency programs that have a completely different time frame. They're short, they're focused, fewer partners, but reaching numbers of people. And I think that's a great success as well. I also think that in terms of our program, we definitely improved, going back to the point about learning products, we improved how we shared success stories, how we developed them, who was developing them in the field. So it wasn't just about, this is, Rakutu and this is his example, but it's taking the data and the evidence, is it following a trend we see? And let's highlight this success because it represents something really worth sharing. But then making it, really interesting. I'm not going to say where, but I was on a visit with some USAID staff and they said, success stories are so boring. And that thought really made me think, okay, well, I take that comment. Thank you. Let's make them better. And so we went back to the team and really worked with our learning and our meal and our comm staff to make it interesting, but to share those participants' stories from their voice. So I think how we've done that documentation and sharing that out has definitely improved. And I think it makes technical teams also more excited about doing the learning and also brings others together, especially those that are frontline staff and community volunteers in the field, that wouldn't be normally a part of that, as Florence mentioned. And I think that really is, part of what we do. It shouldn't just be for us, but it should be for everyone, including our frontline staff and our participants.
Thanks, Kara. I know you two might not be seeing everything in the chat, so I'm just going to highlight a great comment from Lynette saying if she had $1 for every time she's heard the statement, "You're the CLA person, just do it." Yeah. Question: what approaches do you both use to help instill a culture of it's for everyone, by everyone, and in a way where it's not a box checking exercise? You all have already talked a bit about this with both of your experiences and how that culture began to take root. What are some other aspects that contributed to the snowball effect you all both described?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And because it's not a technical question, every time I have a different answer or different techniques. So I guess you just have to try out and see which one works. But I would say, I think some of the things that we have tried in the program that have worked, I think it was the first thing is really creating a safe environment for people to be able to contribute. So the psychological safety is very important. So making sure people are, able to engage in those difficult conversations and highlight the failures and what's not working. And then the other thing is, show, don't tell, right? Like show them, some of them are already doing these things, but in a very unsystematic way. And for us, we really want to make sure we have systems in place and processes so this can be scaled up and the program can learn as a whole and not just like a few people doing the learning or just one sector in this big program. So really showcasing that good work that's already happening, even if it's not called CLA or it's not called learning, but if people are actually taking time to reflect on what's happening and they have the desire to improve something, then I think showcase that and let people learn from that. And then the other one is thinking about the incentives and motivations, I can't emphasize enough. So don't tell them you want this to be the best program, or you want the organization to be good, or, try and find, what's going to be a trigger for them, so that they can really partake in this. And then I think one last thing that I'll say, and this builds onto what Kara said about bringing the comms team, the M&E team, and these other people to really think about, for example, the success story. How do we make them better? I had an initial challenge when I really started focusing on program learning in CLA, because I'm a part of the monitoring and evaluation team. I've always been, but most people just were like, well, this is an M&E thing. I don't want to do M&E work. Like, M&E people go and like do your indicator monitoring, like you're trying to push us to do M&E work. So trying to figure out how do you communicate and really say, this is beyond M&E data. So I think for my program, for example, we had like good examples where in our learning plan, you highlight learning activities that are beyond MEL data. So you don't want to tell them in your quarterly review meeting, you're just going to review indicators and discuss, have you achieved the targets? Why have you not? Or what's happening? You want to think about creative ways of how you engage the teams to answer the learning questions that you have identified. We introduced like different monitoring approaches. We use the most significant change story methodology. We use outcome harvesting. We just had ad hoc discussions, and I kept encouraging the team that whatever you observe, like that's evidence, bring it, let us discuss. Let's see if you want to do like a quick monitoring exercise, because this is happening in a lot of places and we need, more concrete evidence or more rigorous for us to advocate for something. That's okay. But it has to start from somewhere, and it starts with you. Thank you.
Perfect. So well said. Kara, how about you?
Yes, I think probably a lot of similar approaches to what Florence was saying, but I really, in our experience, we really wanted to focus on learning leaders and leadership. So when you talked about the snowball effect, another program in our country program that's not funded by the usual donor, actually a lot of private sector, they had asked us, can you share, your learning plan, your tools? I hear you do these pause and reflect. We've not, can we try this? And what I thought was really ingenious is they did these, they implemented the tools, but it wasn't the meal staff who did this, it was their chief of party. And to show and demonstrate the importance, opening it, discussing it, talking about the tool. And I think that the learning leaders who are not necessarily meal or learning staff really set the example. I think that oftentimes we hear from our local mission, we hear from our agency staff, but when it comes right to people and they're saying, aha, it shows that incentive structure that Florence was talking about, but also that we lead by example. We're leaders in our programs where we are. Are we walking the walk? Are we talking the talk? Do we live and believe? Are we learning with purpose? And I think, to me, as Florence said, we're demonstrating, this is helping us. It's getting us to where we want to share. And also another point about that too was we talked a lot about on our team, and Maharo is being proud. In English, it doesn't sound as great, but we would make it fun. Like, you want to brag, tell me what's going on, tell the story. What are we achieving? How is it going? How did this work? And it was more like Florence mentioned, the technical people telling the story and learning together. And they said, an individual said to me, I'm so glad that people are interested in learning about our nutrition programming, because that's not usually what people think about. And they were really honestly shocked, but happy, because they thought, well, it's about time. And they shared that to me as an aside, because it's not often an area that gets, maybe attention. So I think that, recognizing also other staff, For those that are engaging with communities of practice, recognizing them in the group, in the larger sense, look how they're sharing, demonstrating that for them, it's also a learning by all, for all, and how that's helping them as individuals, as professionals, as also a program. And I think that was a very key aspect of it. But for us, I think the learning leadership really created that change, got the conversations going, and also, it became kind of a flagship, and also an example.
Beautifully said. There's another question in the chat. What approaches have both of you seen as working when trying to bring together CLA, M&E, as well as resilience monitoring, evaluation, and learning data and teams? This is an interesting question because you all have both been hitting on the constant conundrum of this perception of M&E and CLA and the integration. Working in complex environments takes everyone being involved in continual monitoring and adapting.
That's a good question. And I think I'll start by saying there are different ways that we can think about learning and adaptive management, but for easier conversations with the team, for me to engage with them, or just look at it as, we need evidence to be generated. So there's the evidence generation piece. We need someone to synthesize, analyze, or translate that information into something that can be used. And then we also need people to really, use that evidence to do something. And most of the time, when people bring up the question around M&E, CLA, comms, resilience, gender, all these people, I ask them, what role can they play, right? What learning competencies do they have, or that do they need for them to play a role, in this learning and adaptive management process? So are they people who can generate evidence? Everyone from our team can generate evidence, as we said earlier, because it's not just about the rigor of the methodology. If you are able to see something, you can observe and bring that information in. So you're generating evidence. It doesn't matter if you are an M&E person, a comms person, a program person, our finance team, our operations team, they bring that information in, right? When it comes to synthesizing the information or analyzing the data or putting it in a presentable manner, we know that there are people who have that as an expertise. So it's who within the program can do that, right? Or who within the program can facilitate discussions for people to be able to synthesize information. So we just look around and say, okay, do we have someone who can do that? It doesn't matter what their title is, right? Can someone do that? When it comes to utilization, we know who is the person who is going to make a decision around taking this approach, adjusting, allocating more resources to this element, shifting staff. There are people who hold the power in terms of reallocating resources. We want them to take the lead, so that that evidence can actually be applied. So within the team, I think we have really shifted the conversation from, is it M&E, is it CLA, is it program team, is it finance? It's where can you contribute? If you don't have the learning capacities, we can help build those learning capacities so that you're able to contribute significantly. So my answer to that is, I think let's shift our conversation to, these are the learning capacities, or these are the adaptive management capacities that are required. Who in our team has those, or who needs to have them, so that we can all work together.
Thanks, Laura. Kara, anything to add?
Yeah, I would build off and say, in our team in CRS, we have a lot of conversations about capabilities and competencies. And I think crucial to what Florence is describing is when we talked and kind of drilled down into learning plans and how is it useful for the team and what different types of learning and information are they capturing, synthesizing, and using, being very clear when it's used for, at what time, for whom, to make it simple, but also the more simplified, but also the idea that building off of the competencies and the talents of the different staff, who is more open and who is more detail oriented to do the data analysis, who's more of a go-getter, a cheerleader, is great at facilitation, and looking for focal points within the teams that lead those different aspects. And it became very natural. It wasn't, sometimes, yes, it was challenging, but taking and building off of those people that you see have that already, have that inquisition. And I think those soft competencies are just as important as the technical ones. Individuals who are open to learning, that's why in our Maharu CLA plan, those 4 values are critical. Being open-minded, and open-minded to try new things, into the process, into the tool. I think those aspects get overlooked, and it was our idea is to try to bring that out more and create that enabling environment through learning leaders. And identifying what type of data and information is needed when and why, and that we're a team and it's not falling on one person, but it's the collective that's working towards that goal. And I think it's important too when talking about learning plans, and I would say even theories of change. They're quite complex. People freeze up, they get scared, but it's really sparsing it apart and really talking about, this is great what we do as a program, but what are our participants doing? How are we changing their lives? Really coming back to the intention of the purpose. I think that was a great aspect, and helping teams really drill down. If we're talking about a specific behavior, we're talking about a specific change, but not just looking at the whole even one purpose theory of change. I think it's very, I think it's better to be simplified, and simple is better. And also, I would say going at the pace of the team, reading how things are being received. We did a lot of that. We tried this facilitation, and during a quarterly review, and that didn't work. We changed our approach. We get feedback from the team. How did you like this? And every quarterly review, every annual review, we get our feedback sheets, or we, and really honing in, what can we do better, so that the next time around for our quarterly reviews, we're really paying attention to how people want to learn together too, and realizing that some people learn in different ways, not death by PowerPoint all the time, or, and really trying to be more creative. And I think identifying the different tools and the different systems for the different learners, and to keep people engaged.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We are, I have a zillion different threads that I want to pull out here, but we are actually going to turn it over to a sort of chat storm intermission, and then we'll come back to continue the conversation. Jenny, I turn it over to you.
Right. Thank you, Eleanor. Yeah, so that's been a great conversation so far. And what I want to bring you back to is, you may remember from the beginning of the meeting, that one of our objectives for this space is for participants to also share some of their own promising practices and experiences as well. So Kara and Florence have talked extensively about how they've worked to build a learning culture in their own programs. And we're curious to hear from you as well, the participants here at this meeting. Have you done anything that has helped create a learning culture? And if so, you can raise your hand and share that with us here. Feel free to do that. But if you're also not sure that you would like to do that, you can also put that in the chat and share that with us in the chat. So we're really interested to hear what other people have done to create learning cultures in their own organizations or their own programs. Yes, I see a hand raise. Nsikan, you can come off mute.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone.
Hey.
Okay, My name is Nsikanafia. I work with the Learn to Read project. It's a USAID funded project, and I work under Creative Associate. I'm the CLA advisor, and I came in. I saw some of the comments earlier around the challenges, getting colleagues to actually, key into the whole concept of CLA, and it's really been challenging. I know when we are talking like this, it sounds a little bit easier, but actually integrating CLA into implementation of programs is very difficult, because as it were, CLA is still a new concept. Yeah, it's been around for a while, but in terms of the mainstream development, it's still very new. And coming in, I introduce tools, ideas, trying to see how we can encourage learning in the project. And there was a major pushback, because everybody was saying, I wasn't engaged, I wasn't employed as a CLA staff. You are the one that was employed. It's your work. I'm asking for evidence of learning, pause and reflect, lessons learned from activities. They say, no, it's not our responsibility, it's yours. And yeah, it's been difficult, but along the way, we actually had a breakthrough. And the breakthrough came actually from my from the COP of our project. We got talking, and he came up with this idea of starting a learning session where colleagues can come together every week, even though it sounded a bit too much, every week, and then we can share learning, from what has been happening. Indirectly, one has to constantly look at the direction of the project, and try to identify what are the things that we are learning from the key activities and from everything that is happening within the project. So we started what we called a weekly learning session. It happens every Friday, and it's actually a 1-hour activity. Initially, when it started, there was a measure of pushback. Everybody were like, no, it's too much. How will you expect us to be coming together every week and all of that? But eventually it became like, everybody just got so used to it. And now, people are looking forward to it. And I'm even called Mr. Learning Session in the project, but the thing is, the good thing about it is that we have been able to use the session to identify some of the challenges that we've had in the course of the implementation. And the session has been a way of actually trying to realign and adapt, and also solve some of these problems that were identified. And also is an opportunity for the team to collaborate, because we realized that we were working in silos. People didn't really know what the colleagues that were doing. If I'm in this unit, we are doing our thing. So nobody really knows what the other person is doing. So it was also an opportunity for especially staffs in the operations, because finance and all of that, those people, they don't really know what happens in the field. Their own is just do budget and all of that. But having a session like that, it got some of them to be interested in what is happening in the technical side of things. And it's been a very, very wonderful experience for us. And it has also helped in other aspects of the CLA, because it's more like what got people to now be interested in other aspects of the CLA. In fact, I have other colleagues, that have come to me and say, oh, we didn't know that this CLA is this interesting. Probably, we'll consider it, going forward. So yeah, in terms of, developing a learning culture within the organization, this is exactly what we've been doing, and it's an ongoing process, and we've actually gotten a lot of success from it. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. That is fantastic. I think what's super interesting about that is that it highlights a lot of, it's another approach that highlights a lot of what was brought up by Florence and Kara. But it seems to me like it was a very useful exercise for trust building, and for breaking down those silos and allowing that communication flow to happen. So thank you so much for sharing that. I don't want to talk too much because I see there's another hand up, and I want to get to one more example. Lynette, would you like to share your experience?
Thank you so much. Actually, my experience is not different from the previous speaker. So my approach to fostering learning, this activity is I like to make learning fun, especially because organizational learning is mainly for adults. So to break the monotony of it being consistently technical sessions, I introduced something called Learning Mondays. So we have a timetable for the Learning Mondays that if we do something technical related this Monday, the next Monday, any of the staff members, anyone on the team is at will to propose something that's outside the technical aspects of what we're doing. It could be something on mental health, it could be something on gender, it could be something, something fun so that everyone feels that they're involved and they can actually utilize the learning sessions for their own personal use and also for professional growth. So that has worked greatly that now, because I was able to give my team members something to work with, not just me pushing down the CLA aspects all the time, what worked, what didn't work. We had an event the other week, let's quickly review it. Because I brought in that aspect of you're at will to actually share with us as well. We can learn from you too. It doesn't have to be the other way around. I think that has helped to promote learning on this activity. People actually now, similarly to the previous speaker, Learning Mondays are something, they're like a running joke in the office, but in a good way. Because in case, when someone is out there and they find something new or something that could benefit the activity, they're quick to say, let's use a Learning Monday. Can I have a Learning Monday for this? Even the operations team, when they're having trouble in doing their finances, or if someone is not bringing in their stuff on time, even the smallest things like what happened at an event, we converge as a team and learn. So I think bringing in that aspect of it didn't have to be serious all the time, because I know to break the monotony of, okay, we do work during the day. Now you're wasting my time. That aspect of the lack of time for learning on activities usually is a problem. So instead of it being, you're going to waste an hour of my time on a Monday, moreover, I could be answering emails from the weekend. I had to bring in an aspect of actually, we could do what you want to do so that you can also benefit from it. But largely it's been the same experience as the previous speaker. But I'm proud to say that approach of the Learning Monday has actually now been adopted by our sister activities, and they utilize it as well. They actually also come and attend our Learning Mondays. We've used it for collaborative learning as well, and being able to identify different areas of collaboration amongst the Feed the Future activities. We're not really collaborating, we're working in silos, but because we pioneered that slot of Learning Mondays, and we actually sit on the same on the same building. We're neighbors, but we're working in silos. But then now it's easy for them to say, we want to brainstorm on something. Let's book a Learning Monday and see how it works. So we hit two birds with one stone. We'll be collaborating, we'll be learning, and we'll be adapting as we see fit. Yeah, that's my submission.
Wow, thank you, Lynette. Thank you so much. So you are speaking my language because you said the word fun. And I often say, so
Yeah.
we have our own pause and reflects in the ideal activity. And I often say that if you're not having fun, then why are we doing this? Because we're not learning anything if we're not having fun. And we just have 1 minute, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Eleanor. But I'm going to share one technique that we've used in our pause and reflects that has also been fun, but has also allowed us to dig into some of the data that we've received from our annual surveys in Ideal. So one of the techniques that we use in the pause and reflect to look at the annual survey data is to divide into teams, assign bits of the data to each of the teams, and then have them create a newspaper headline, like a front page newspaper of the actual results, highlighting some of the interesting results, and then present that newspaper out to the group so that then there can be a discussion around the different results. And that's been a really fun technique for digging into some data as a team and reflecting on that data and learning from it. So I just wanted to share that. I am going to hand it back to Eleanor to ask our presenters some more questions. But before I do, Eleanor, I have a question for Kara, so I'm just going to throw it out there and then let you go from there. Kara, I know that you have mentioned to me previously that you found it challenging working, coming from a development resilience background, and then working with many colleagues who have come from an emergency background. And I'm wondering how you have worked with colleagues that have come from an emergency background. What have been the specific challenges to building a learning culture that you've seen just from that particular sort of like perspective of emergency humanitarian programming? And then I'm gonna go on mute now.
Great, thank you so much, Jenny. I'm sorry I had to turn off my camera. We have low bandwidth here and I don't want to drop the call. So yes, our program is a RIPSA program, but essentially an emergency program that we had been operating as an emergency program, I would say, for the first 3 years. Many of our staff come from emergency backgrounds. So for us, in terms of learning, it was what we discussed before, really identifying the learning opportunity, and as you said, making it fun for staff, doing it in a way that demonstrates this isn't an extra, or it's not going to require an extra effort. It's actually going to benefit us. And I think it was the last speaker who talked about, if I take an hour of my time, man, what can I gain from that? You know, so it was actually using different tools like integrated monitoring visits, after action reviews, but even smaller things, realizing like, wow, we did this and it didn't require that much more time, and look what we gained from that. And having fun. I mean, we really did try to make it fun and interesting and really engaging. And I think that definitely adds to it. I would say that for emergency staff, timing is critical, and tools need to be simplified, need to be really also for us, it had to have an ethical component, right? Our program started out focusing more on pilot learning than operations research. One, because we were operating during COVID and starting up during COVID, but two, we could not get international research consultants to come to Madagascar. And the quality of national consultancies was a bit not as great as it could have been. So rather than, well, we can't do anything, our team said, all right, let's go for this. We're going to pilot and we're going to learn by doing. And I think, honestly, that approach was worlds over more beneficial for them, because it really demonstrated the idea of learning by doing, adaptive management. Let's try this. This didn't work. Our care group programming said, we don't need to do 9 modules. We're working in an emergency zone. We have, 20% of our children that have SAM rates that are so high. Let's focus on these 6 critical modules, because our maternal child health specialists, our doctors, she said, this is going to save children's lives. This is what it's about. So their learning was, let's try this, let's see how it goes, but we don't need all this. So I think it was really focusing on the context, the ethics behind it, and how learning could be important and useful from them, from their perspective as well. I think that was very important. And getting feedback from the field teams, and understanding that emergency context had an ethical implication as well. It was emotional for our teams. It needed to be understood that it was helping them do their job better, to save lives, to improve people's lives. So I think that was a very good learning point for us as well in doing that process. And sometimes I think those components aren't often talked about, especially in humanitarian programming. Thanks.
I love that. The way that you do no harm is through continual learning and adapting. Florence, anything to add on that last question? If not, we have another question in the chat. All right. So Brenda's asking, what can a project do if one stakeholder is more interested in the resources they can get and not the capacity building?
I'm trying to think, is the stakeholder a part of the participants or people who is benefiting from the program? Sorry, it's not very clear how I should I make that assumption? Okay. Yeah.
Well, Brenda, please feel free to speak up if you want to add any clarifications.
Yes, please. That would be helpful.
Hello, good morning. It's an institution and that we are working with. It's external. It's not from the organization. Thank you.
Good. So I think in this case, that just means either the approach is not aligned, if it's an external partner and you're trying to do something with them. If people have a good understanding about the outcome that we are trying to achieve, right? I feel like there can be an open discussion about the approach. Because in some cases, it's true that just capacity development by itself may not lead us to achieving the outcome that we are looking at achieving. Sometimes resources in terms of financial support may be required for us to achieve those outcomes. But also to say, if your program, for example, in this case, Brenda's program, if their approach is really get at capacity development and they do not have any additional financial support that they can give the partner or organization, but they think that that is required to achieve the outcomes, then I think that's where the element of collaboration comes in, right? So try and look around in that area. Do you have other partners who are working to achieve the same outcome? Are there other sources, that people can tap into to get the resources they require? And only giving this example because we have had that case in my activity as well, where we were working with community structures. We call them resilience action committees. We were really helping, build or enhance their capacity to be able to identify community needs, prioritize them, and advocate for resources. So we realized that a lot of the communities were doing that. They had all a very big list of like, these are our needs. We want to prioritize them. They go to the government to advocate for those needs to be incorporated in the budgets. But due to limitations, the government was not able to incorporate most of their urgent and priority needs. And then we shifted our approach to really look at who are the other partners, where can we create linkages so that the communities are able to tap into other sources. So it doesn't have to be your program doing this, but I think we have a mandate to try and look around and say, who can we collaborate with? Who can we pull in if we are really looking at achieving this outcome and we feel like resources, either financial or otherwise, is something that is needed. So I think that collaboration element with external stakeholders is very important.
Thanks, Florence. Brenda just dropped in the chat. Your advice helps a lot. Appreciate it. Here's another question. Could you please share again the LinkedIn link on learning? Of course, we will. Someone can drop that in the chat. It'd be great. I want to go back to first encourage anyone to drop additional questions for our two speakers into the chat. I wanted to go back to a common thread that both Florence and Kara described in terms of the importance of leadership. So not just the importance of leadership in terms of cultivating the psychological safety that creating a learning culture really entails. It's also kind of the symbolic actions that they can take. I was thinking of this when Annette was talking about Learning Mondays. For that the head of that program to say on Mondays when everyone is feeling rushed and catching up, and to make this a top priority, that sends a tremendous message. If there were one or two things, Kara and Florence, that you would recommend leaders of programs do to send that kind of message, what would it be? Or in your experience, what did you see the leaders of the programs you've been working on do that had an immediate effect?
Yeah, if I could share, I would say it's their initial engagement and one of, excitement, engagement, intentional, active, showing that they care, showing they're behind this, as well as discussing learning and sharing evidence and how we're using this information in key meetings and key discussions, not just with the donor, but with external partners. We participate in a food security cluster in the southern part of Madagascar. We started sharing out our monthly resilience data that we collaborate with on Cornell University to WFP, to all the actors in the cluster, and they were ecstatic. And the idea was, well, this is information and data about all participants for all humanitarian programs. So it was also demonstrating that the idea of sharing, right? That we don't have that intellectual property. Sometimes, oh, we can't share that. Well, why not? If we have the information, we've collaborated with our partners, why wouldn't we share it? And I think what now people see is we are the organization or even a program sharing it out. Sure. Would you like this data? Let's have a public data and learning, external facing event. Sure. Let's bring in our actors. Let's bring in our research partners. Let's bring in our implementing partners. Everyone is welcome. And I think that too, with our leadership participating in that and being behind it, it shows that we live and breathe knowledge management and learning. It's not just we do it because we are supposed to and we have to. We believe in it for the betterment of the Malagasy people in southern Madagascar where we are. It's to benefit them. And we're all in it and we're all doing this for the right reasons and for the same reasons. And I think that is so powerful. And you can see other organizations, wow, you're sharing. Well, of course, it's public facing this, I think that proprietary aspect and people taking that away shows how it's learning for all by all. And really, that was a key component, I really believe, that changed that environment and set an example for others and other staff. Thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Florence, how about you?
Yeah, so I have one really good example, and I think something that has worked for a lot of the teams. And then I have an unpopular opinion about leadership support on learning, but something that we can all work on, I think, based on experience. So I think the first part is just to add on Kara's. I mean, we need the leaders themselves to promote the generation, the use of evidence. We need them to stand and actually reference evidence when they're making strategic decisions, so sharing and engaging external stakeholders as well as the teams. One critical thing I think that really shifted things for my activity was the allocation of resources by the leadership to promote CLA in the program. So we had, hiring of staff, we had time allocated, for learning. We had, frequent review meetings where the leadership was always there, and they were the ones asking the questions. So I feel like that's very important. The other side to that is I feel like when you're really starting to build the learning culture at the very initial stages, a lot of people think that if, for example, the chief of party or the director says, let's all collaborate with the CLA person to do this thing because it's important, they think that, will cut it. Sometimes we first need to engage the leadership for them to actually understand what learning is and what it will require and what they're signing up for. Because we have people who are like, yes, let's go. But then when you start having discussions around, we probably need more resources to figure this thing out because we are seeing things, but we need to do an assessment, or we need to readjust our budget, or we need to negotiate with the donor to revise our theory of change because of what we are seeing. Or we need to look at restructuring, for example, because the team currently, there are some things that are lacking and we need to either bring people in, or we need to, look at the reporting lines and adjust that. We just have people who are not really ready to take that step because they were not prepared for what it means to actually learn and adapt. So I think before we get that, like, yes, leaders are supportive, we really need them to also understand exactly what that means and what it may call for in the program so that they can be consistently supportive and champions, even when it's very difficult times.
Perfect. Perfect. Florence, we are at time, so I'm going to hand back over to Jenny, but I just want to say thank you to both of you, Kara and Florence, for sharing your vast experience and all of these gems about how to influence leaders to be the adaptive leaders that we need to support adaptive management, continual collaborating, learning, adapting. One of the things I'm taking away is really keep it simple. Both of you really stress that. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Jenny, over to you.
There we go. I've got so many things open, I couldn't find the unmute button. All right, so that was wonderful. Thank you so much, guys. That meeting went by really quickly. I can't believe that we're at time already. It was a really fantastic conversation. I would like to, again, thank our speakers and also the audience for being engaged and sharing some fantastic examples of your own. So as we close, Bella is going to put into the chat an evaluation. So if you want to go ahead and open that evaluation and start filling in that evaluation, I have a few just quick announcements to share as we close. But these evaluations are very important for shaping our future meetings. We definitely value your feedback. So please take some time to share with us your thoughts from today. So I'll be sending a follow-up email to all registrants in the next few days. We'll share some links to resources that will be helpful for applying some of the approaches that you have heard about in today's meeting, specifically from Kara and Florence. And also there was a question from Stephanie about some recommendations for some, fun, inspirational ideas for some fun learning activities to be able to do. We'll put our heads together on that and share some resources that we can come up to besides the one I've already posted in the chat in that follow-up email. Our next meeting will be in 2024. So I'm sorry, we're going to take a slight break. We're going to be back January 2024 or the beginning of February. We haven't set a date yet. Apologies for the long delay. December tends to be a time of catch up and rest for people, and we want to give people that space to be able to rest so that we can come back and have some interesting discussions next year. But just a preview of what we're thinking for that meeting, we'd like to partner with our Associate Award Gender and Youth Activity, Gaia, to really look at some learnings that they have taken from a recent fellowship that they have done with implementing partners around capacity strengthening for both field-based emergency and resilience programs to utilize qualitative data for learning, especially around social inclusion and resilience dynamics, and actually using that data and transforming it into some kind of change within the program. So we're going to work with them to try to come up with an engaging session around social inclusion and resilience dynamics. If you would like to stay engaged with the ideal activity to improve your culture of learning before the next LAM meeting, we have an exciting opportunity in November for BHA activities to pilot an activity learning cycle toolkit that we've been working on. It's specifically meant to help implementing partners to analyze and adapt their own learning cycles and their activities for improving the application of learning and adaptive management, and also their learning culture as well. So if you're interested in learning about this or participating, you can contact myself or Nicole Helm. Those emails are there in the chat right now. And if you are interested in hearing directly about these opportunities, you can join our listserv. So Bella will paste a link to our peer community page where you can find a link to actually sign up to the listserv, and then you can get direct communications from us. We don't spam you, I promise. It's like maybe once a month you might hear from us, once or twice a month max. So again, thank you so much for attending today. We really appreciate your engagement, and we appreciate you showing up here and sharing